couldn't go in because journalists couldn't go in and only lawyers could. The usher, the one person who all day seemed to actually recognise that I was a barrister, told me to ignore her and head on in. When I went in, I opened the door and a barrister or solicitor, it was a magistrate's court, so we weren't wearing our wigs and gowns. So I think that's probably, important context. We all the professionals wear, black suits.
Yes. Yeah.
And so a barrister or solicitor was sitting at the back of the courtroom, and as I opened the door, she told me to wait outside of the courtroom. The usher would come and speak to me and sign me in for my case. I said to her I was the defence barrister.
Has that barrister since apologised?
No, she hasn't. No. And I said I'm the defence barrister. I'm here to speak to the prosecutor. She, that would have been the opportunity to apologise. To be honest, she could have said sorry then, but no, she said, "Oh, I see," and turned around. And she was clearly embarrassed, but there was no apology. And then I started to walk in the courtroom. Now I started to walk to the front of the courtroom to speak to the prosecutor. The magistrates were out, so as is normal, you go and speak to the prosecutor before the case. The clerk, the legal advisor in the case, then shouted at me to get out of the courtroom, again telling me to wait outside.
This is actually,
I would be signed in.
Why are we saying 3 times? This is 4 times. You had the security guard. Then you had a member of the public that felt that they could tell you to get out. Then you had a barrister in the court make presumptions, and then you had the legal advisor in the court assume that you... This is actually 4 occasions within a very short space of time. The assumption was that you, Alexandra Wilson, did not belong there, could not belong there, and no assumption that you were the barrister. And can you just tell me, not just how did that make you feel, but your sense of why they came to that judgment? Was it your race? Was it your gender? What do you think was going on across those 4 occasions?
I think the main thing, to be honest, it did feel that it was my race, because there were other women, there were other white women going in and out of the courtroom that weren't challenged, that weren't stopped. There were other white men going in and out of the courtroom. The barrister who told me to leave the courtroom wasn't particularly old herself. Some people have said, is it because you look young? There were plenty of young looking people. It's the magistrate's court. It's very common to see junior barristers in the magistrate's court.
Right.
It's not... it's not particularly unusual. So it did feel that actually I was being challenged. I was dressed the same as everyone else. I was wearing a black suit, a black handbag, black shoes. There was no reason. The only thing that separated me from all the other people was that I wasn't white.
Alexandra, this is an appalling day for you, clearly. Has it happened before?
Many times, to be completely honest, many times. And the reason I tweeted about it that day was because it had happened so many times on one day. And for me, when I got shouted at, I wanted to cry. And, I had a client outside the courtroom waiting for me. I was so humiliated. And it just felt like this was just too much, and that I'd been taking it on the chin every time it happened. And I have a bit of a platform, so I thought, actually, this is time to speak out about this. And what's been so difficult, David, actually, is, you've said it, and so many other black barristers have said that they've had the exact same thing. I've had, in the 24 hours following me speaking out about it, at least 3 black QCs reached out to me personally to say that even as QCs, sometimes when they're sitting as judges, they get refused entrance to go into, through the judicial entrance. And it's like that, how...
Is this just the price of being a minority? I.e., wherever you're a minority and in a minority situation, you have to accept that people will get it wrong. There'll be some saying, "Oh, come on, you're fortunate. You went to Oxford. You're a barrister. So people made a little mistake. What's the big deal?"
And that shouldn't be the case. That's the key thing. Why should it be that when I go to work, I can't be recognised for my job? And the point is that, I'm not expecting any kind of preferential treatment being a barrister. At the end of the day, and I've said this before, everyone should be spoken to with respect. For me, actually, it was really, it highlighted a huge problem that anyone even gets shouted at. That for me was a huge thing. I was like, no defendant should be shouted at anyway. But the least I expect is to be able to do my job without being stopped and sent out of a room.
The
I want to be able to do my job.
I suppose the point about the defendant is you've got to ask, if you're treated like that as a young black woman in this court, what confidence can black people have if they are a defendant in a criminal court in this country?
Absolutely. And I think that's the scariest thing, to be honest. I completely echo that. I think, knowing that I am as qualified as every other barrister in there, how worrying is that for, many of my clients who are young black defendants? How can I reassure them that this is a really fair system? And what if they see me being treated like that too? And I'm sure there have been many times where I've had white clients and, the usher has approached them and asked them, for assuming their counsel and saying, is your client ready? I'm like, hello, actually, I'm the barrister.
Alexandra, you've done, this is extraordinary. And, I've got a young daughter at home. She's only 6, but it's my dream and my wife's dream that one day she's as successful as you are. My God, I will have died and gone to heaven. And the idea, and that will be in another 20 years. I don't want to be sitting here in another 20 years with this same old story going on of stereotyping and discrimination that's so profound and cuts so deep, because clearly it cut pretty deep, and you're being required to be resilient, to kind of be tough, to get on with it, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think now I'm grateful that the press and stuff have picked up on it. It's highlighted to so many people what so many black barristers are going through day in, day out. It's not good enough. And I think I appreciate that, the head of the court service has apologised, but we need to see action. We need to see change now. We need to see not just basic equality and diversity training. We need to see actually anti-racist training. People need to know that there are these problems and how they can practically overcome a lot of these issues. People need to be conscious of the fact that actually when someone walks into the building, there shouldn't be any assumptions. You can just ask a question. What are you here for? That there doesn't need to be, are you a defendant? There doesn't need to be any assumption underlying anything that you're saying. And one of the things I've picked up on from speaking to some other people this week about it is, sometimes the people making these assumptions, they're not always white. I think that's one of the hardest things is actually sometimes you'll get people who are black or not from another ethnic minority background.
Thank you for saying that, Alexandra, because it's important actually that your own ethnicity and other people who are ethnic minorities can also make assumptions about who should or who merits and be discriminatory. So this is not just a conversation that's directed at those who may be white. There can also be discrimination within communities. Alexandra, I'm going to end it there. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for interrupting your Saturday afternoon to share this story once again with us. I wish you the very, very best of luck as Shadow Justice Secretary. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep on doing it. And my love to your family and to your parents.